Okay, we're still looking at material.angular.io documentation, which is the documentation version 10 for Angular material design. We want to just go over a couple of more examples with the autocomplete. We're going to take a look at this one example which uses option groups for autocomplete. And basically what this is you can have this nested structure in JSON data which actually contains an array of grouped data, and the grouped data being when I click on the input box, it could show me these labels which have different options. So each label will have its own set of options. And so this is what the demo is describing, and what the demo is trying to teach us. So let's take a look at the detail and take a look at the code and try to figure out how this is working. So first, let's do this. Let's really try to understand what they're trying to tell us. So here, notice if I type in a character, what's happening is the value changed observable from the input field is getting streamed into my data, and the data is getting filtered, and basically the panel gets re-rendered dynamically, and it shows me the label as well as the options for that particular group. Okay, so let's take a look at another example. So let's see if I do F has Florida, N has Nebraska, Nevada, New Hampshire. Okay, and let's try B. B isn't showing anything. Well, it's because there is no B label in my data. So we'll take a look at the data right now, but I just want to show you how this particular example is working. The other thing you just have to notice is that I cannot activate the label. I have to click on one of the options within that particular group. And so let's take a look at the code. I'm going to go right to stackblitz to see just to look at the code. So my apologies. Now let's take a look at the example code. We know that we have a main module here. Nothing new. It has this autocomplete opt group example, which is my root component. And the bottom line is that root component's getting bootstrapped with the module. Nothing new here. Nothing new here. Let's go to the root component. Now the root component is in the index.html. This is the component UI component tree that's getting rendered. And let's go right to the example of the root component, and let's take a look at this thing. So basically what we have is component, form group, a form builder, observables, and start with operators, a map operator, and what we have is this state group, which basically is this interface for my component that basically has a letter and an array of strings. A letter and an array of strings. Basically what we're looking at is this letter and the array of strings. Letter and an array of strings. So we know what that interface is going to be used for, and now we look at this filter here function. There seems to be a function here which is filtering the options, and basically the options is an array of strings, there's a value. There's the filter function has an option, the options and a value, and basically the value is filtered to lowercase, and we filter the options with an item to lowercase index of filter value. So this is a function that's being defined. Let's look at the component. The component has a selector and has a template. Now this is the root component. And if you notice, there's a state form, which has a form group. It uses the form builder to group together the state group. The state group is the state of the form in this particular use case. Now here's your state groups. Your state groups are these groups here, which it's an array of a group, and so each JSON object is in this array, and basically what we want to do is we want to be able to filter those and be able to change the panel that's showing over here. So basically, by default, since I didn't type anything in, it's going to show me everything. Once I type in a character, this array has to be filtered, and it's filtering the letter, and based on that, it's getting the names to show in the panel. Okay, so let's take a close look at the code here. So here we define a state group options observable, and it is an observable of the state group array. Why? Well, first of all, I'm rendering this big array with all these letters in it and all these options for each letter, and as my values change as I type in this F, basically what I want to do is I want to get the subgroup with the letter and its options, and that's what's happening here. So here I have an observable, which is looking at the changes. Now the constructor has a form builder, a private form builder group, and basically on a init we're basically taking that state group and putting it in the state group options element, and what we're doing is we're saying, okay, we're going to monitor the values changing here, right? We have this observable, built-in observable, value changes, and when the user types in this F, what I want to do is stream this thing and pipe it into a map, a filter map that gives me that resulting group. So in this case here, I get this form, I get the state group, and I do a dot, and of course, if it's defined, I do a dot value changes, which gives me this observable stream of characters, which represents this group here. Let me change that to an N so you have a better, clear understanding of what's getting streamed here. And loosely speaking, it is one element, it is one object that's showing as I type this N in. It's this element, really. When I typed in the N, what I did was I plucked the object that had the letter N in the JSON data. Now we didn't use pluck here, but anyway, it doesn't matter. There's many ways to do different things. So in this particular example, what happens is initially on a init, even though nothing interesting is happening, the initial state is all of the objects. I am using this observable to filter. So as the value changes, this underscore filter group function will eventually get invoked. So when I do this, what happens is the value changes, the streamed value comes in, and this filter group comes in and returns a state group array, which is my panel values, my label and my options. It's a JSON object that I'm representing visually. So so basically, what happens is the group is basically the value comes in here, and the letter what we're mapping is I'm mapping it to this group dot letter and these names which are here. And of course, I also do a dot filter because I don't want to I have to make sure that the length of the group names is greater than 0. And then I return the state group. So let's take a look. It's an interesting example, and it is relatively simple, but you know, there's a lot of bang for the buck here. And of course, once you start loading dynamic data, you don't see the static data, so it gets a little bit more complicated. But let's take a look at the template and see what's so interesting about the template. So the template seems pretty standard. You got the form, the mat form field, the input placeholder. Oh, you got this thing that's required here, which is kind of different. And then you got the mat autocomplete auto group. Now, the mat autocomplete is pointing to the auto group reference. The auto group reference is defined with this hash symbol here to point to this template. Now, that's okay, and that's pretty standard. But the thing that's a little bit different here is that we have a mat option group tag, and it's a little bit different. That option group has nested structural directives, right? So the mat optional group has ng4 let group of state group options, which is getting piped to an async. So as I type this n, the filter in the stream is coming back to the panel, but it's also declaring this option group to be a label, which means that I'm rendering this label here. There's a style on the label, and I can't activate the label. I can only activate the option. Okay, so and then it's really just showing the label is actually equal to the group letter, which we know already because we could see that. And in the code, the group has a letter attribute. So the other thing is inside that mat option group, we have a mat option. And there's another structural directive there. It iterates through the name of group.names. So I've zoomed in on the group. I'm showing the letter, and now I'm zooming in on the group.names to go get those names of options. And the option's different. It gets highlighted, and I can activate it, right? So that's the crux of this particular example. Now, once again, this is what am I visually seeing and what's in my particular form control, and that's where there's a difference. Okay, so it's the same situation here. We're not using display with here, but we are working with an array of objects, and I am picking one of them. And even though I'm visually looking at Nebraska at this point, behind the scenes, I could be working with the JSON object, which has a letter N and attributes and names and a value. So let's just go make sure that we understand. Yeah, so this is the state group. The form is a state group. So although I'm visually looking at this, I've chosen this, but I basically have in my form this filtered state group. Okay, so that's all we really wanted to show for this example. It's an interesting example where we can look at different observables are working in our favor. We have these arrays that are grouped, and we use labels. We use nested mat options per label, and we use an additional options group tag to accomplish what we needed to accomplish. Let's move on with other examples.